Have you ever wondered what would happen if you took the best chess player in the world and supercharged his abilities to the next level? Well, in this video, we're going to check out how Magnus Carlsen changed his playing style based on the chess computer AlphaZero. AlphaZero was the creation of the Google DeepMind team. Essentially, they coded a computer to have 4 hours to play training games against itself, and ultimately they put it up in a match against Stockfish, the strongest chess computer at the time, and AlphaZero drew 72 games and won 28. It didn't lose. I'm gonna take you through 5 of Magnus Carlsen's games after the creation of AlphaZero, show you the incredible playing style that AlphaZero brought to the table, and how Magnus implements it in his games against top players. Before that, though... You like my glasses? I got some new glasses, but you can tell me if you don't like them. I'll go back to the old ones. And also, people, I never ask this, but 44% of you are not subscribed to my channel, and we are trying to hit 1 million. We are at 925,000. It would be an incredible milestone. I work extremely hard. I'd be extremely grateful. Thank you so much. And if you're already subscribed or you're watching way in the future, well, I appreciate you very much anyway. Let's get into the games. Just gonna quickly shout out New in Chess magazine. They're an awesome global publication. They featured this story of Magnus meeting AlphaZero. Some of the games in this article are featured in this video, and there's a link to this PDF in the description. Also, there's a super awesome book by English Grandmaster Matthew Sadler called Game Changer. It's all about AlphaZero and its development, but for now, let's jump into the games. Okay, so in game number 1, Magnus has white against Shahryar Mamedyarov from Azerbaijan. This is a game played in Stavanger, Norway. And this game is a a Grunfeld defense with the queen's pawn, d4, c4, and black strikes back with d5. Now, layer number 1 of AlphaZero's playing style, it loves flank pawn attacks. It loves dominant center control, and it negates the movement of the enemy pieces. That is one thing that it loves to do. It takes space, commits its structure, as long as it can shut down its opponent. Now, here we have a mainline Grunfeld. This is e4 takes, bishop g7, okay? Seen many, many, many times before. Magnus plays bishop e3. This setup with bishop to e3 is a favorite of AlphaZero. It loves central stability, but so far so good. Nothing crazy yet. Rook c1, knight f3, all normal stuff. Queen a5. And one thing that oftentimes happens in Grunfeld positions is that this a2 pawn is sacrificed so that white just gets a lead in development. You'll notice Magnus is checking all the boxes. He has a massive center. His opponent is just lagging behind in development enough. And what Magnus does here is he plays a fascinating move. He plays knight to d2. To the untrained eye, this looks frankly like bogus. It doesn't make any sense. But here's the amazing thing about this move. First of all, it actually reinforces the center, one thing that was not going on. It fights for these squares. There could be potential queen traps in the future. But more importantly, it opens up these 2 pawns moving. AlphaZero loves belligerent attacks on the king, especially if it can lock up the center. And when Shah brings his queen out, here we see, you know, you would think you kind of play f4 or close up the center. No, we have h4. That was the other idea of knight d2. Your bishop now opens up to h5, and you can just do this. It breaks everything that we know about the game of chess, but here's the incredible thing. You would think that the point is to just destroy the structure around the king. And it looks like that's the thing. And we have Mamedyarov playing kind of a counterattack on the other side of the board. But no, it's actually not to chop down the pawn at all. The point is to play this. And if the opponent moves the bishop forward, what you're going to do is kick the bishop all the way back. AlphaZero freezes the opponent's, like, it looks like you stop your own attack because where can you go? But it sees deep into the future. Deep into the future, and it realizes that by killing off the activity of your opponent's pieces, it's worth a pawn, and that's why the move queen takes a2 way back, giving up the pawn, happened. And the game that AlphaZero played against Stockfish looked like this, so it was a little bit different. This is now, we're looking at AlphaZero Stockfish from their match, but it does the same thing, and it won a beautiful game. When you plug this position into a computer, like, ironic, right? It doesn't realize how strong white's advantage is. And I would imagine that in the game Carlsen Mamedyarov, the same thing happened, right? And so what Magnus does throughout this game is he kind of tries to dominate this bishop. And he actually ended up getting a very, very strong initiative. You'll notice his pawns completely lock out the bishop. The knight cannot make any sort of forward progress to his position. And he's better. But of course, even though you can activate your pieces and ultimately like try to take the position to the next level, you're not always going to win. He actually wasn't able to win this game because, well, that he's a human, right? The computer would be able to. But look at this. The justification of having this pawn on h6 shows in the following move. Knight to g5. Look at this incredible move. If pawn takes, you have queen d5 check. It's nearly made. E6, you obviously are not going to take, but you will go here. And you've got checkmate threats like lurking. I mean, this bishop is just awful. Like, black is essentially playing the entire game down a piece. And as you let Stockfish sit on this position, it goes higher and higher in its evaluation. And I mean, Magnus just is able to break apart kind of the barrier there, but ultimately Shahryar was able to defend this position, and a queen trade happened. And even though Magnus was dominant and was restricting, it was Shah getting able to, you know, he was able to get rid of his bishop. Well, some argument can be made, like maybe Magnus in this position bailed out. Maybe he could have just kept applying pressure without taking on b5, because bishop b5 allowed this kind of little trick with bishop takes g2, king g2, queen b7, and then this. But actually, here, the computer gives a hilarious variation, which in the game, you saw Magnus go for queen f3. It gives d5. And I would be willing to bet that AlphaZero would play d5. And here's the point. If you take the pawn, you're not going to take my bishop. So you take my bishop. Now I block up this, and then I play this. And something tells me that AlphaZero would love this position with a capital L. Love it. And actually, Stockfish prefers it as well. So sometimes you can play like AlphaZero early on, but then you play like a human, and that's where your kind of mistake pops in. But again, AlphaZero would love this. Total pawn dominance, super obscure position, but the long-term benefit of the H-pawn attack, the flank attack, Magnus does that all the time to his opponents. And listen, if you get a winning advantage in 20 moves at top-level chess, what more can you ask for? Okay, game number 2. This is Magnus with the white pieces versus Russian Grandmaster Maxim Matlakov. This is played in Douglas and Isle of Man. It was the Grand Swiss. The winner of this tournament, actually, Wang Hao, ended up qualifying to the candidates. And we have another Queen's Gambit. By the way, just as an aside, AlphaZero loves d4, c4, knight f3. It loves this. It loves this, okay? With a capital L. So the semi-Slav variation is very tricky for black. There's a lot of ways that black takes the pawn, plays b5, negates development for the cost of a pawn. Or to win a pawn. But if you think about that, that's exactly what AlphaZero loves. It loves, and I keep saying that, to give away a pawn for quick development. Bishop g5. One of the things about AlphaZero is it goes for the sharpest variation every single time. h6, this. This is one of the craziest variations in chess, b5. This is, it can turn into a Botvinnik. The Botvinnik semi-Slav has literally 40 moves of theory, some of these variations. And Magnus goes for this position. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're watching an AlphaZero Magnus Carlsen video. What move is Magnus going to play here? Yes, you guessed correctly, h4. You have to attack. You have a lead in development for the cost of one pawn. You have to create flank attacks. Now, of course, Matlakov doesn't take. He goes g4, attacks, and now tries to trade this knight. Magnus slow plays the position. Bishop to e2, bringing another piece to develop, targeting this. Okay. Now, in the game, Matlakov played bishop b7. However, here is an example of AlphaZero Stockfish, once again, inspired by this. This is a whole point, Magnus learning from AlphaZero. In that game, we got knight e5, bishop e5, rook g8. And you would think that being, okay, pawn down, and already pushed my h-pawn, of course I'm not going to castle, but no, the computer castles short. Bishop b7. And the incredible thing about AlphaZero's sacrifices is that, despite being a pawn down, it slow plays the position. And what it does is it sucks the life out of you. g3, like, look at this. What is this? It's preventing black from getting anything on this side of the board. Then, queen c2, just slow improvement. Knight d7, slow improvement. And potentially the most incredible thing here is, watch this, b3, b4, it moves the knight. It gives its opponent a protected pass pawn, but by killing the mobility that black has, now you open it up, and because you have such a strong center, you're able to push through. Now, when I say push through and breakthrough, what do you think? You think, of course, breakthrough with d5. No, e5. Seemingly a frozen move, because how on earth are you going to break through the position now? Well, You're going to win the dominance of the diagonal, dislodge the positioning of the rook, and go like this. And this is how AlphaZero suffocates its opponents to death. It just doesn't let them move. For example, if you try to look for simplification, I will play knight to c5, and I will kill your play. Your bishop is garbage now. It will never get into the game. Now, this is an aside, but Matlakov played bishop b7. Let's watch how Magnus is able to apply, or attempt to apply, kind of the same principles. He plays b3, right? He allows this b4, and now the knight is kind of always coming to c5. The tricky thing about AlphaZero is that while you can get to a position where you look to be dominant, just like we saw in the last game, we're humans. So just because you use the prep to get to the position, sometimes the prerequisite to actually win the game is the fact that you need to play like the computer. So watch, knight c5. Takes. Magnus gives his opponent this pawn. I mean, it's not quite giving him the pawn, but had Matlakov taken and gone 2 pawns up, we would have gotten this, the queen would have moved, then Magnus would have played e5. For example, if the bishop goes back to, let's just say e7, looking to trade, now we infiltrate. We are controlling the opponent's play, shutting down his bishops, his rooks are disconnected, his king can't move anywhere because of the queen, the rook coming in, and that's what Magnus would have done. That's why he played knight c5, because even for the cost of yet another pawn, the activity of the enemy is killed. Now, e5, bishop has no more moves. Bishop can only take on h4, but who cares about the h4 pawn? Rook d6, okay, take it, go ahead. Go ahead, take my pawn, bishop c4. Now I am 2 pawns down, and you can take, but if you take, I have another piece coming. So of course Matlakov doesn't take the bishop, he backs up. And now he wants to play h5, h4. So Magnus just improves the position of his pieces. And Matlakov is playing without 2 pieces. He's up 2 pawns, but he's playing without 2 pieces. That is the way the computer... And look at this f4 move! Look at this f4 move! You can take en passant, sure! Oh, sure, but then I'm activating my rook. So what does Matlakov do? He takes this way, but I've traded one of your attacking pieces, one of your active pieces, but I have a new one. And throughout this game, Magnus kept on applying the pressure. He went on to win on move 80, because he's a human being, and he kind of, made some inaccuracies in a crazy position, plus with time trouble. But you can see, like, how crazy this is. He's just 2 pawns up, but he is totally negating the bishop and the rook. Isn't that nuts? Like, how does this work? And we can watch as the game develops. Matlakov kind of goes for a little bit of counterplay and trades off the pieces. Magnus ultimately had to be super precise as Matlakov got his pieces here. He played queen f5. He was completely winning. I mean, it's just incredible. Look at this. These pieces just aren't moving. King d8. And I believe the inaccuracy happened... A takes b4, I think, was the inaccurate move. I think Magnus had to just go for the hunt here with queen f8, rook f7, king here, and then queen e7 was the key move. This is what he had to do with the queen patrolling everything, and you can't, even if you get checked, you're safe, for example. Or for example, even here, maybe you can play bishop f1, probably is better, rather than running out with your king. So Magnus should have done this and then played bishop f1, but the reason he played a takes b4, it's move 35. And on move 35, there is time trouble, and that is where mistakes are made by human beings. But up until that point, he was playing like the computer. Everything about this game was AlphaZero inspired. Now we're in 2020, and I will show you another example of this kind of similar attacking style against Anish Giri. You will notice we have the exact same 3 moves. Against e6, AlphaZero really likes to go knight f3. Against g6, AlphaZero, of course, goes knight c3, inviting the Grunfeld and all those different ideas. But because we have e6, we have knight f3, and Anish went for a semi-tarash. This is all theoretical, so the next like 15 moves of take, then the trade in the center, another trade in the center, known to be a very solid line for black. Black trades a lot of pieces. Castle says, okay, I'm slightly passive, but I will hold the position and I won't lose. And this is an online game from the Chessable Masters. It's actually funny. When I was a baby on YouTube, I made a video of this game. It has like 40,000 views. And this is how the game went, okay? They played a bunch of like natural looking moves, and here Magnus played rook e3. Okay, with rook e3, you make your intentions very, very clear to your opponent. You would like to move your knight at some point, play rook g3 and checkmate, or rook h3 and checkmate. Like, it's very clear what you want. So Anish plays knight f6. Now, the thing about knight f6 is it attacks the pawn on e4, and if white were to push this pawn, then this would allow black to plop to d5. If black wins control of d5, this is not AlphaZero style, this is just very good for black. Black now owns the center, has an active queen, an active rook, this bishop will be active anytime I move my knight. It's not what we want. So, Magnus plays d5. Now, this kind of idea has been seen before. After pawn takes, his idea is not to take back, it's to play e5. That's his idea. This has been seen before by humans, but it gets a little AlphaZero little infusion later. So, pawn attacks knight, yeah? And the knight moves. The knight comes here, and Magnus just makes a very calm move. Queen e1. And now, Anish, good luck. Because the threat, first of all, is rook takes, and then I can maybe take the queen. I also have this pressure. But there is something much worse coming. I will rotate my knight to that square, okay? The square that I freed up when I sacrificed my pawn. So AlphaZero, pawn sacrifice, yeah? Negating the activity of the bishop, and then let the fun begin. a6 to prevent knight b5. Ladies and gentlemen, we are watching an AlphaZero game. Drum roll, please. Here it comes. Pawn to h4. This move seems to be completely stupid, actually, because why? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to prevent the knight from coming to g5? Because it never had any intention to do that. In fact, what are you doing about this? Well, if you take, there's, of course, f3. So you actually would be losing the pawn. Now, the knight can go to c5. I don't understand. What's so good about this? Just knight c5 here. Well, the thing about this is that this pawn forces the knight this way. And in the future, we'll play h5, h6. And essentially, what the computer would say here is, I have the time to do it because I killed your activity. By killing your activity, I've realized that you can't actually do anything to your position. So Anish plays rook d8. We have this. And now Magnus just can get away with playing h5. He can just play this move. Before, he even plays knight f5 or queen g3 and threatens mate. Like, he could just play h5. But in this game, it's worse to play h6. You can play h6, but you shouldn't. Because you cannot get your knight to f5. That's the problem. And you're not going to mate me because you won't. I'm going to stop that by playing queen e7. So instead, Magnus plays knight f5, d4, rook d3, and now Anish tries to come back. But the problem is d4 is lost. Now Anish's idea here was that he would take on b3. He would take on b3, Magnus would take back, maybe we would have some game. But Magnus says, well, first I will go here, creating this attack. And then I will take, you cannot take my knight because you're pinned, rook d8. And now a beautiful move, e6. And queen is hanging, rook is hanging, king is locked down on the back rank. And this pawn is just constantly hovering around here. And he won it a few moves later. He won it even in flashy style, you know, like this rook is here to be captured, but it's the pawn that makes the walk. And king is safe, everything is safe, the pieces coordinate beautifully. Rook h4, intending, of course, knight takes h4, I don't know, some blockade, and Magnus just in fancy style plays king g3. Not even taking the rook, because you cannot stop this, or knight h6 mate, there's everything, it's all lost. So, pawn sacrifice on the center of the board, rotate your pieces around that pawn, push your flank pawn, infiltrate, attack, like, lights out. But all these games have been with the white pieces. Ladies and gentlemen, what does AlphaZero have to bring to the table when you are playing with the black pieces? Well, it's an Armageddon game in Norway chess. Magnus Carlsen has the black pieces versus Wesley So, and he himself wants to engage Wesley So in a Grunfeld. Wesley So plays f3. It's kind of an anti-Grunfeld line, and it's trying to force your opponent into a King's Indian defense. Because if you play the Grunfeld now, I'm going to play e4 and then knight c3. You'll notice that in most Grunfelds, this knight gets traded for this knight. So this is kind of known as a neo-Grunfeld. And white gets a very nice, big center, healthy center. AlphaZero would love this center. But, guys, we're talking about AlphaZero. Like, so what is AlphaZero going to bring to the table? Here, according to theory, a few moves get played. For example, e5 is a move to try to jump the knight into the middle. But we need flank pawn attacks, right? So f5. And here what white has always done historically is block the center. Block up the center. Okay? And for example, if black plays like bishop to e6 to kind of fight for the light squares, that doesn't actually stop anything because there is just d5. Say, how is that possible? Well, just count the attackers and defenders. Right? So That doesn't work. And then, for example, if black plays knight b4 to try to put something on d5, that happens, and usually what white does is try to play h4, h5, maybe f4, knight f3, and kill you. So AlphaZero oftentimes will sacrifice material in the name of activity. F4! And Magnus plays it against Wesley So. AlphaZero has played this move. Now, this is the fascinating part. All computers say, nah, there's no way. There's no way this is any good. I just take the pawn and then I crush you with h4, h5. This is the line they analyzed with AlphaZero. Knight b4, h4, bishop e6, lining up my own attack, okay? h5, you ignore it, you play c5, they take you, you ignore it again, queen c7! Pawn takes pawn, king h8, black is down 3 pawns! 3 pawns! But you've activated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe 7. All of your pieces are about to be involved. All you have to do is play pawn takes pawn. For example, let's say black plays pawn takes pawn. Queen c5, white is lost. Sorry, if white plays pawn takes pawn, it's lost here. Because you can't prevent all of this. Like, this initiative with all these pieces, king is hiding behind this pawn, totally safe. Incredible. So Magnus must have had this prepared. So what did Wesley do? Hey, guys got AlphaZero behind him? Just goes back. But, you know, still, Magnus then proceeds to second knight. And of course, if you take, which is possible, Magnus has the rook coming in. Very, very inspired play. According to Stockfish, there is a way for white to stabilize here and not get a completely lost position, but it's not easy. It's definitely not easy to do. There's like all sorts of tricks. If you take, I have rook a1, then I take your rook, it's game over. So in the game, Wesley just played this, and then Magnus kind of went for a hunt over there, and it was a wild game, and actually Magnus was a lot better. They ended up drawing, which I think still was good for Magnus, because in Armageddon games, as long as black draws, black wins. That's what Armageddon is in chess. Black has less time, but if black draws, black wins the Armageddon. That's just one of the formats. But yeah, there you go. Even with black, flank pawn attacks, sacrificing potentially up to 3 pawns for activity. AlphaZero is an absolute lunatic, and this final example will prove it. Okay, we're back to the white pieces. This is against Levon Aronian. This is Zagreb, Croatia, 2019, classical chess tournament. Listen, you gotta copy the openings AlphaZero plays. This is the Rogozin defense of the Queen's Gambit declined. We've seen everything. We saw c5, we've seen Grunfeld's, and this one is, again, a bit weird opening. I'm not gonna spend too much time on the opening, but this is kind of like the main position. Okay, let me actually include queen d2 and bishop takes pawn. Very weird, I know. Queen is next to the king, it's adorable. It's not really the way most chess positions are supposed to look, but it's weird, it's imbalanced. There's bishop knight versus bishop knight. Both sides have a knight and a dark square bishop traded. And black plays rook d8. Now, the threat of rook d8 is very simple. You are pinned, and so e5, right? So you have to move out of the way. And now black plays bishop d7 to try to play knight c6, trade, activate the bishop, everything is good. Of course, if I ask you here, what is the most natural looking move for white, ladies and gentlemen? Not the AlphaZero move, what is the most natural looking move for white? Of course it is short castle. You don't even think. It's short castle. I mean, what else can you do? Yeah, so this is where I introduce the final part. One of the kind of crazy things about AlphaZero's playing style, it really values something called king mobility. In fact, AlphaZero really doesn't like to castle if it doesn't have to. It likes the fact that there are open squares near its king. I don't know why. I don't understand why, but here, Magnus castles queenside. AlphaZero really likes breathing room for its king, because I guess it feels like it's not cramped, and it opens the board up for more dynamics. AlphaZero is a kind of a belligerent drunk guy, yeah? Knight c6. And now we see the point. We see takes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're watching an AlphaZero video. h4, of course. Even in the eye of potentially trading rooks, it doesn't matter, because I will take, and then my rook is going to come, and I'm going to punish you here. Queen f6, rook h3, and b5. Now, here, Magnus played rook g3 check, and he got some very interesting and dynamic position. But here, the analysts of the game were like, hey, maybe Magnus could have gone full AlphaZero and played h5. Oh, sorry, he could have played h5, invited b4, and just played h4, h5, h6 in the middle of the game. Just push the pawn. Why? King safety, big weakness, but light squared pawn. And you have a light squared bishop. So in all endgames, because you kill their mobility of their king, the bishop will have some sort of target. For example, let's say we had a big simplification here. This endgame is very, very clearly better for white. For example, I mean, you can't take my pawn, because if you do, there is rook to g3. But even if you don't blunder a bishop in one move, and I go here and you play like, oh no, that would hang a bishop. You just try to go for a bishop trade. I will take. You cannot take because back rank mate, courtesy of my h-pawn. And if you take like this, now you've split pawns. You have 4 pawn islands. 4 pawn islands. That's very bad. In endgames, you cannot have pawns so split. You need pawns to be cohesive and together. So Magnus had a chance to go really full AlphaZero, but again, you know, he has, it's human nature. But do you notice what Magnus is doing here? My dude is playing Tetris with his rook. Again, instant replay. Boop, 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 boop. Like, what? What? If I had a 7-year-old student that played like that, I'd be like, bro, what are you doing? But it's Magnus Carlsen, so I have to sit here and be like, oh, that's so... Don't move a rook 4 times in a row in a game unless you're Magnus Carlsen. But this is the type of stuff that AlphaZero does. Like, look at this. He somehow got his damn rook to f4, and he's pushing the flank pawns. And Magnus, throughout this game, was kind of applying this degree of pressure. G5, BC3, look at this, bishop c2. Look at this, rook f6. Look at what he's doing to Levon! He just completely allowed full access to this side of the board and just plugs the queen out of the game. Now, granted, the queen ended up getting back into the game, and Magnus continued to apply this pressure, creating all sorts of checkmate threats, clamping down on that side of the board. Because it came out of a super theoretical variation, king d2, by the way, the king moves out of the pin, black is never fully lost. Like, it's still very complex. Aronian does a good job creating counterplay, but Magnus was constantly badgering him with all sorts of different threats. Look at this pawn attack. If you plug this into a machine, it's like 0.4. It's always trying to tell you that this is never actually fully winning. And ultimately, once the players made it past the time control, it did get into a drawn rook endgame. But let's be serious. One man was having fun playing this game. And it was not Levon Aronian, okay? It was Magnus Carlsen. So that is a brief summary of how AlphaZero inspired the play of Magnus Carlsen. I should say, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much, as always, you are very much appreciated, that AlphaZero didn't just inspire Magnus Carlsen. It's inspired damn near the entire chess world. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that 1200s play h4, h5, h6 in every game. I feel like you'd hang like 3 pieces while you do that. But the truth is that this is an incredible game changer. In fact, there is a book out by Grandmaster Matthew Sadler called Game Changer. You should feel free to check it out. I've got the book on my phone, and I read through it when AlphaZero first came out. There's a lot of videos out on AlphaZero. At the time of recording, I don't have AlphaZero versus Stockfish as a video, but if you're watching way into the future, that video does exist. I already have the thumbnail for it, so I plan to record it in the future. Many other computers have been coming out as a result of AlphaZero. Leela is one. It's an incredible powerhouse, and there's a lot of others. This kind of self-training mechanism. For me as a chess player, I don't think chess is doomed at all, because the truth is, I generate some ideas in my preparation from AlphaZero and Leela and some of these engines, but just because the computer's 3700, as you saw from some of these games, just because you get the prep on the board does not mean you will navigate the position correctly. I am just fascinated that the game of chess can constantly develop. If you go back 50 years, we know so much more now about chess than 50 years ago. The average 8-year-old chess prodigy knows more openings than they did 50 years ago. Can you imagine 50 years from now? It's gonna be crazy. So I wanted to share this video with y'all because it's just interesting to see how chess computers improve the top level guys and just how much better they can actually get with already the tools that they have now and the training partners that they have now. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. You heard my early plug. Please do subscribe as we try to approach 1 million. Let me know, as always, in the comments if there's a topic that I haven't covered yet, some games I haven't covered yet, and, you know, I read through them. I will see you in the next video. Get out of here.